Damon Cross owned the biggest house in the whole city. It sat on top of a hill, surrounded by tall iron gates and green gardens that stretched out like a soft carpet. People said his family had more money than some small countries. But money was not the only thing the Cross family was known for. Everyone in the city also knew that Damon ran a powerful business empire that worked in the shadows, a business that made grown men nervous just to hear his name. Some called him a boss. Some called him dangerous. Very few dared to call him kind, because very few had ever seen that side of him. Inside the big house, life moved like a quiet clock. Guards stood at the gates. Drivers waited by shiny cars. Cooks worked in the kitchen. And somewhere in the middle of all that busy, careful world, there was a young woman named Ivy Marsh who cleaned the floors, folded the towels, and made sure every room in the mansion looked perfect. Ivy had worked as the housekeeper for almost a year. She was not rich. She did not come from a powerful family. She came from a small apartment on the other side of the city, where she used to live with her mother before her mother got sick and passed away. After that, Ivy had to grow up fast. She learned to work hard, to stay quiet, and to never complain, because complaining never fixed anything. She learned that the safest way to survive in a big house full of powerful people was to be invisible. But Ivy was not really invisible. Not to everyone. Damon Cross noticed her, even though he never said much. He noticed the way she hummed softly while she dusted the shelves in the library. He noticed the way she always left a glass of water by his desk in the morning, even though nobody told her to. He noticed that she never once asked him for anything extra, not a raise, not a day off, not special treatment. She simply did her job with a quiet kind of pride that most people around him did not have. Damon was used to people who wanted something from him. Business partners wanted deals. Guards wanted approval. Even his own fiancée, Celine Vane, always seemed to want more. More jewelry, more attention, more proof that she was the most important person in his life. But Ivy never wanted anything like that. She simply worked, and somehow, that made Damon trust her more than he trusted almost anyone else in his big, guarded world. Celine Vane was different from Ivy in every single way. She was beautiful, with long dark hair that always looked perfect, and she loved to wear sparkling jewelry that matched her expensive dresses. She had grown up rich, just like Damon, and their families had planned for them to marry since they were children. Everyone in the city called them the perfect couple. Newspapers loved to print photos of them standing together at fancy parties, smiling for cameras. But behind the smiles, Celine was not always kind. She liked to be the center of attention, and she did not like it when anyone else got noticed instead of her. She especially did not like it when she noticed Damon's eyes lingering a little too long on the quiet housekeeper who moved through the halls like a soft shadow. One cold evening, after a big dinner party at the mansion, everything changed. The party had been full of important guests, business owners, politicians, and old friends of the Cross family. Celine had worn her favorite necklace that night, a shining diamond necklace that Damon had given her as a gift 2 years earlier. It sparkled under the lights of the ballroom, and Celine made sure everyone saw it, holding her chin high as she walked from guest to guest. But after the party ended and the guests went home, Celine stormed into the living room with her face twisted in anger. "It's gone," she shouted. "My necklace. Someone took it." Damon looked up from his desk, where he had been going over papers from the party. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean, it's gone, Damon. I took it off before I went to change, and now it's not there. Someone in this house stole it." The guards came running. The staff gathered in the hallway, worried looks on their faces. Celine's eyes moved across the room until they landed on Ivy, who stood quietly near the doorway, holding a tray of empty glasses from the party. It was her, Celine said, pointing a sharp finger at Ivy. She was the last one in my room today. She was cleaning it before the party. She must have taken it. The room went silent. Every eye turned to Ivy. I didn't take anything, Ivy said, her voice shaking but steady. I would never do that. Of course you'd say that, Celine snapped. Thieves always say that. Two guards stepped closer to Ivy, ready to take her away for questioning. Ivy's heart pounded in her chest. She had never been accused of something so serious in her whole life. She thought about her mother, about how hard she had worked to raise Ivy the right way, to teach her honesty even when times were hard. Tears started to build in Ivy's eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of everyone. Wait. Damon's voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze, including the guards who had already reached out to grab Ivy's arms. Damon stood up from his desk and walked slowly across the room. He looked at Ivy's face, at the fear and the honesty mixed together in her eyes, and something inside him told him to trust what he saw. Let her go, he said to the guards. Damon. Celine's voice rose sharply. She stole my necklace. Are you seriously taking her side over mine? I'm not taking anyone's side yet, Damon said calmly. I'm asking for the truth. And I don't believe accusing someone in front of everyone, without any proof, is the way to find it. Celine's face turned red with anger. She was not used to being questioned, especially not in front of the staff. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. Prove I'm wrong, then. Ask her yourself. Damon turned to Ivy. His eyes were steady, not cold, not cruel, just searching. Ivy, he said gently, did you take the necklace? Ivy lifted her chin, even though her hands were still trembling at her sides. No, sir. I swear I didn't. I cleaned Miss Vane's room this afternoon, but I never touched her jewelry box. I would never steal from this house. This job means everything to me. Damon studied her for a long moment. He had learned over the years to read people carefully, to notice the small signs that showed when someone was lying, the way their eyes moved, the way their voice shook in a certain way, the way their hands fidgeted. Ivy showed none of those signs. She looked scared, yes, but not guilty. I believe you, Damon said quietly. Celine let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. You believe her? Over me? Your own fiancée. I said I believe her answer, Damon replied. That doesn't mean I've made a final decision. It means I'm going to find out the truth before anyone gets punished for something they might not have done. He turned to his head of security, a tall, serious man named Rowan who had worked for the Cross family for many years. Pull the security footage from today, Damon ordered. Every camera near Celine's room, starting from this morning until now. I want to see exactly what happened. Rowan nodded and left the room immediately. Celine crossed her arms, clearly unhappy that her accusation was being questioned instead of accepted right away. This is ridiculous, Damon. You're wasting time over a housekeeper. A person's freedom is never a waste of time, Damon said firmly. If she's guilty, she'll face the consequences. But if she's innocent, I won't let her be punished just because it's easier to blame her. The room stayed tense as everyone waited. Ivy stood quietly, her tray of glasses trembling slightly in her hands, though she tried to hold them still. She had never expected the powerful, distant Damon Cross to stand up for her like this, in front of his own fiancée, in front of his own guards. For the first time since the accusation, Ivy allowed herself to breathe a little easier. She did not know what the security cameras would show, but she knew, deep in her heart, that she had done nothing wrong. She only hoped the truth would be enough. As the staff slowly went back to their duties, whispering quietly among themselves about what had just happened, Damon walked over to Ivy one more time. He spoke low, so only she could hear. "I won't let anything happen to you until we know the truth," he said. "You have my word." Ivy looked up at him, surprised by the gentleness in his voice, so different from the powerful, unreadable man everyone in the city feared. "Thank you," she whispered. Damon gave a small nod and walked away, leaving Ivy standing there with her heart racing for a completely different reason than fear. Outside, the night grew colder, and inside the walls of the great mansion, the truth was waiting to be uncovered, a truth that would change everything for Damon, for Ivy, and for the woman who thought her lies would never be caught. The next morning, the mansion felt different. The staff moved quietly through the halls, whispering about what had happened the night before. Some believed Celine. After all, she was Damon's fiancée, and she had never lied about anything so serious before. Others were not so sure. They had worked with Ivy long enough to know she was one of the most honest people in the whole house. Ivy barely slept that night. She lay awake in her small room on the lower floor of the mansion, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of what had happened. She thought about her mother again, about the promise she had made to always stay honest no matter how hard life became. She thought about losing her job, about not having enough money to pay her rent, about being labeled a thief for the rest of her life, even though she had done nothing wrong. But she also thought about Damon's voice, steady and calm, saying, "I believe you." That memory gave her just enough strength to get through the long, worried night. Early the next morning, Damon called everyone into the security office, a quiet room filled with screens showing different parts of the mansion. Rowan, the head of security, stood by the main computer, ready to show what the cameras had recorded. Celine arrived last, wearing a confident smile, sure that the footage would prove her right. She stood near Damon, resting a hand on his arm as if nothing was wrong between them. Damon gently stepped aside, not unkindly, but clearly enough that Celine's smile faltered for just a second. "Show us everything," Damon said to Rowan. From a moment Ivy entered Celine's room this morning until the moment the necklace was reported missing. Rowan nodded and began playing the footage. The screen showed Ivy entering Celine's bedroom around noon, carrying a small basket of cleaning supplies. She dusted the shelves, straightened the bed, and folded a few clothes that had been left out. At no point did she go near the jewelry box sitting on the dresser. In fact, the footage showed her carefully cleaning around it without ever touching it, almost as if she was being extra careful not to disturb anything that wasn't hers to touch. Celine's confident smile began to fade. "Keep going," Damon said quietly. The footage moved forward in time. Ivy finished cleaning and left the room. The door closed. For a while, nothing happened. Then, later in the afternoon, the door opened again. It was Celine. She walked into her own room, glanced around quickly, and then walked straight to the jewelry box. She opened it, pulled out the diamond necklace, and studied it under the light for a moment. Then, instead of putting it back, she walked to a small drawer near her closet, opened it, and placed the necklace deep inside, hidden beneath a stack of scarves. The room went completely silent. Celine's face turned pale. That's not what it looks like," she stammered. Damon's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, almost frighteningly calm. "Then explain what it looks like, Celine, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you hid your own necklace and then blamed an innocent woman for stealing it." Celine started, but no more words came out. She had no explanation that would make sense, because there was no innocent reason for what the camera had captured. Rowan cleared his throat quietly. "Should I check the drawers, sir?" Damon nodded. A few minutes later, Rowan returned with the diamond necklace in his hand, exactly where the footage had shown it hidden. He placed it gently on the table in front of everyone. The room stayed silent for a long, heavy moment. Finally, Damon spoke, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "You accused an innocent woman of theft. You almost had her arrested. And you did it because—" He paused, studying Celine's face carefully. "Why did you do it, Celine? What could possibly be worth hurting someone like that?" Celine's eyes filled with angry, embarrassed tears. She glanced at Ivy, who stood quietly near the door, then back at Damon. "Because I saw the way you look at her," she finally admitted, her voice shaking. "The way you talk to her, softer than you've ever talked to me. I thought if she got fired, if she disappeared from this house, things would go back to normal between us." Damon's expression did not soften. If anything, it grew more serious. "So, instead of talking to me, instead of telling me how you felt, you decided to destroy an innocent person's life." Celine had no answer. Just then, the door to the security office opened, and two police officers walked in. Rowan had called them earlier that morning, following Damon's orders in case the footage proved someone had lied about a serious crime like theft. The officers looked around the room, then at the necklace on the table, then at Ivy, who stood frozen with fear at the sight of the uniforms. "We received a report of a theft at this address," one of the officers said. "We're here to take the suspect into custody for questioning." Before anyone else could speak, Ivy's whole body went stiff with panic. She had done nothing wrong, but she knew how these things sometimes worked, how people without money or power could still end up blamed, even when the truth was right there in front of everyone. But before the officers could take a single step toward her, Damon moved. He stepped directly between Ivy and the officers, standing tall and unshaken, his voice steady and clear. "Arrest me instead." The room went completely still. Even Celine, still crying angry tears, looked up in shock. "Sir," one of the officers asked, confused. "You heard me," Damon said. "If someone in this house is going to be blamed for a crime that didn't happen the way it was reported, then take me. Because I refuse to let an innocent woman be taken away for something she never did, especially when the real truth is sitting right there on that table." He pointed to the necklace, then to the security screen still showing the recorded footage. "The footage clearly shows my fiancée hiding her own necklace and blaming my housekeeper for theft that never happened," Damon continued. "If you need someone to answer for the trouble this false report caused, you can start with the person who filed it." The officers looked at each other, then walked over to review the footage themselves. After a few tense minutes of silence, one of them turned to Celine. "Ma'am, filing a false report is a serious offense. We'll need to speak with you privately." Celine's face went white with humiliation. She glanced around the room, searching for support, but found none. The staff who had gathered near the doorway looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes. Even Rowan, usually loyal to whoever was in charge, kept his gaze steady on the floor. "Damon, please," Celine whispered, her anger melting into desperation. "I made a mistake. I was scared of losing you. Please don't let them take this any further." Damon looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time since they were teenagers, he realized he felt nothing but disappointment where love used to be. "You didn't make a mistake, Celine. You made a choice. You chose to hurt someone innocent because you were afraid of your own feelings. That's not something I can simply forgive and forget." The officers gently guided Celine out of the room to discuss the situation further, leaving Damon, Ivy, and the rest of the staff standing in stunned silence. Ivy, still shaking from everything that had happened, looked up at Damon with wide, grateful eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You didn't have to stand up for me like that, especially not in front of everyone." Damon turned to her, his expression softening for the first time since the meeting began. "Yes, I did," he said simply. "I told you I wouldn't let anything happen to you until we knew the truth. I keep my promises, Ivy." Ivy felt tears prick at her eyes, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, and of something else she could not quite name yet. Something warm and unfamiliar that had started the moment Damon stepped between her and the officers. Later that day, Damon officially ended his engagement to Celine. It was not an easy decision, since their families had been connected for years. But Damon knew he could no longer trust someone capable of hurting an innocent person just to protect her own pride. Celine left the mansion that evening, her bags packed, her face still red from crying. Before she stepped in her car, she turned back one last time and looked at Damon standing on the front steps. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "You'll regret choosing her over me." Damon said nothing. He simply watched as her car disappeared down the long driveway, the iron gates closing slowly behind her. Inside the mansion, Ivy stood by the window, watching the same scene unfold. She did not know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. And somewhere deep inside her heart, she also felt something she had never expected to feel for a man like Damon Cross. A quiet, growing hope that maybe, just maybe, good things could still happen to people like her. In the weeks that followed, the mansion slowly returned to its usual quiet rhythm, though nothing felt quite the same as before. Celine's belongings had been removed from the house entirely, her photographs taken down from the walls, her name no longer mentioned in the halls. The staff, once nervous and careful around her sharp temper, seemed to breathe easier without her presence looming over every room. Ivy noticed the change most of all in Damon. He seemed different now, softer somehow, though still just as serious about his responsibilities. He still spent long hours in his office, handling matters that Ivy knew little about, matters connected to the dangerous business world he controlled. But in the small moments between those long hours, he began to seek out Ivy's company in ways he never had before. At first, it started small. He would linger a little longer in the kitchen in the mornings, exchanging a few quiet words with her while she prepared breakfast. He began asking about her day, her thoughts, her small dreams for the future. Ivy, and used to anyone in the mansion showing genuine interest in her life, found herself opening up slowly, sharing pieces of herself she had kept hidden for a long time. She told him about her mother, about the years she spent caring for her when she got sick, about how she had taken this job, not because she dreamed of cleaning houses forever, but because she needed steady work to survive after her mother passed away. She told him about her real dream, quietly tucked away in the back of her heart, her wish to one day study and become a teacher to help children the way her mother had once helped her through hard times. Damon listened carefully every time, never interrupting, never judging. He found himself drawn to her honesty, to the simple, steady way she spoke about her hopes without any of the games or manipulation he had grown used to in his world of business and power. "You should go back to school," he told her one evening, as they sat together in the quiet library, the fireplace crackling softly nearby. if that's truly what you want. Ivy shook her head gently. It's not that simple. School costs money, and I need this job to survive. Dreams like that are for people who don't have to worry about rent and bills. They don't have to be, Damon said. Not if someone helps. Ivy looked at him carefully, unsure of what he meant. I don't want charity, Damon. I want to earn my own way. It's not charity, he replied. It's an investment in someone who deserves the chance to build the life she actually wants, not just the life circumstances forced on her. Over the next few weeks, Damon quietly arranged for Ivy to begin taking evening classes at a local college, while still keeping her position at the mansion with adjusted hours that allowed her to study. He never made a big show of it, never wanted thanks or credit. He simply wanted to see her dream become possible. Ivy, moved beyond words by his quiet kindness, found herself falling for him more with each passing day, not because of his money or his power, but because of the gentle, protective way he treated her, so different from the cold, distant reputation the rest of the city believed about him. But even as their bond grew stronger, danger still lingered in the shadows. Celine had not truly disappeared from their lives. Humiliated and furious after the broken engagement, she had spent the following weeks nursing her wounded pride, plotting quietly from a distance. She still had connections, still had people loyal to her family who owed her favors. And she was determined to make Damon regret choosing his housekeeper over her. One evening, as Ivy walked home from her evening class, taking her usual shortcut through a quiet street near the college, a car pulled up slowly beside her. Before she could react, two men stepped out, grabbing her arms and pulling her toward the vehicle. Ivy screamed, struggling against their grip, her heart pounding with pure terror. But just as they tried to force her into the car, the sound of screeching tires filled the street. Another car sped around the corner, stopping sharply just a few feet away. Damon jumped out, his expression darker and more furious than Ivy had ever seen it. Behind him, several of his men moved quickly, surrounding the two attackers before they could react. "Let her go," Damon growled, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that made even his own men take a small step back. The two men, realizing they were outnumbered and clearly caught, released Ivy immediately. She stumbled backward, shaking, and Damon rushed to her side, pulling her gently but firmly behind him, shielding her with his own body. "Who sent you?" Damon demanded, his eyes locked on the two frightened men. Neither of them answered right away, but the fear in their eyes told Damon everything he needed to know. He had suspected for weeks that Celine might try something like this, and he had quietly arranged for extra protection to follow Ivy whenever she left the mansion, just in case his suspicions proved true. Rowan stepped forward, grabbing one of the men by the collar. "Talk," he said sharply. "Now." Shaking, the man finally admitted the truth. "Miss Vane," he stammered. "She paid us to scare her, to make her leave the city. She said if the housekeeper disappeared, things could go back to normal." Damon's jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. He turned to Rowan. "Take them in. Make sure the police know exactly who's responsible for this." As his men led the two attackers away, Damon turned back to Ivy, his expression softening instantly with worry as he checked to make sure she was truly unharmed. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently, his hands carefully checking her arms where the men had grabbed her. Ivy shook her head, though tears streamed silently down her face from the shock of what had just happened. "I'm okay," she whispered. "You got here in time." Damon pulled her carefully into a protective embrace, holding her close as her trembling slowly began to calm. "I told you I would always protect you," he murmured softly. I'm in it, Ivy. No matter what happens, I will never let anything happen to you again. Ivy pulled back slightly, looking up into his eyes, searching for the truth behind his words. What she found there was not the cold, guarded expression of the powerful boss the whole city feared, but something warm, something honest, something that looked remarkably like love. Why? She whispered. Why do you care about me so much? I'm just your housekeeper. Damon reached up, gently brushing away the tears still clinging to her cheeks. You stopped being just my housekeeper a long time ago, he said softly. You became someone I trust more than almost anyone else in my life. Someone whose honesty reminds me what genuine kindness actually looks like in a world full of people who only care about power and money. Somewhere along the way, Ivy, you became someone I love. Ivy's heart swelled with emotions she had been too afraid to name until now. I love you too, she whispered back. I have for a while now. I just never thought someone like you could ever truly want someone like me. You were wrong, Damon said gently, a small, rare smile forming on his usually serious face. I don't want power or money or someone who only cares about appearances. I want honesty. I want kindness. I want you, Ivy Marsh, exactly as you are. That night marked the true beginning of their new life together. With Celine finally facing real consequences for her actions, the shadow that had hung over the mansion for so long finally began to lift. Damon made sure Ivy no longer had to worry about danger following her through the city streets, arranging proper protection while she finished her studies. Ivy, in turn, continued teaching Damon something he had forgotten long ago in his world of business and power: the simple, quiet beauty of trusting someone completely, without fear, without conditions. Months later, Ivy graduated from her teaching program, standing proudly on a small stage as Damon watched from the audience, prouder of her in that moment than he had ever been of any business deal or victory in his powerful world. After the ceremony, surrounded by her new colleagues and friends, Ivy turned to find Damon waiting for her with a small, wrapped box in his hands. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, far different from the flashy diamond Celine used to wear, chosen carefully by Damon because he knew Ivy never cared for flashy things. She cared about honesty, kindness, and love that asked for nothing but truth in return. Ivy Marsh, Damon said quietly, kneeling gently in front of her as her friends and colleagues gathered around in surprised, happy silence. You came into my life as my housekeeper, but you became the truest, kindest person I have ever known. Will you marry me? And let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, the way you've always protected the goodness in my heart. Tears of joy streamed down Ivy's face as she nodded, unable to find words strong enough to answer with anything but a soft, happy yes. From that day forward, Damon Cross and Ivy Marsh built a life together founded not on power, fear, or appearances, but on honesty, trust, and a love strong enough to survive lies, danger, and every challenge that once tried to tear them apart. The billionaire who once ruled his world through cold authority learned, through a simple, honest housekeeper, that true strength was found not in control, but in choosing to protect and love someone with your whole, honest heart. And in the quiet halls of the mansion where fear once lived, laughter and love finally found their permanent home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and follow for more heartfelt romance tales. Let us know in the comments which character was your favorite, and stay tuned for more emotional love stories coming soon.